Welcome back to Sputnik. I was one of those that said all would change utterly in relation to Saudi Arabia in the wake of the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. And the early indications were that I was right. The king's brother flew home from self-imposed exile in London. And US Defense Secretary Mad Dog Mattis said the killing in Yemen had gone on long enough.
There was a straw in the wind, however, when Theresa May declined to endorse General Mad Dog's call for ceasefire, disengagement and peace talks in Sweden within 30 days.
The guns haven't fallen silent, and Sweden remains unattended. Our next guest, Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos, was much more sceptical than me, and so far he might be right. Dr. Marcus, welcome back to the Sputnik. Let's deal with the General Mad Dog call for a ceasefire. After all these years and all these deaths in Yemen, he concluded that it had all gone on long enough. Is that likely to mean the war is coming to an end in Yemen, or will that quietly now be forgotten too?
Well, once again, I'm very sceptical of Mattis's comments. I think they're designed just to be merely cosmetic. The Americans have to be seen as doing something about the horrific war in Yemen. After all, they purport to be the guardians of freedom, civilization, and human rights in the world. However, the reality is that the Americans do not want the Saudi military machine to stop until they have accomplished their objectives. Why? Because the Americans are acutely aware that if the Saudis fail in their objective in Yemen, then Yemen could fall out of the influence of Saudi Arabia on the Arabian Peninsula. That could open the doors to Iranian influence and, even more importantly, Russian influence. So that is why the Americans, under no circumstances, will tell the Saudi Arabians to stop, because it is not in the interests of Saudi Arabia and ultimately America and Britain for them to lose total dominance over the Arabian Peninsula. They've lost in Syria. They do not want to lose in Yemen.
But Mattis was very specific. He gave a time, 30 days, at least 10 of which have now gone by, and even a place, Sweden. Why would he be as specific as that if he wasn't serious?
Well, what he says in public is very different to what he says in private, and more people in the world are becoming aware of the horrific war that the Saudi Arabians are prosecuting against Yemen. You know, some estimates are that 600,000 Yemeni people, including many children, babies and toddlers, have perished because of Saudi Arabia's war. So it is a PR exercise, in my opinion, that Mattis is conducting at the moment. However, in private, he's not going to say to the Saudi Arabians to stop. Remember, America, the argument that America is genuinely committed to human rights and to international law is completely untenable. Their actions in Iraq, in the former Yugoslavia, in Syria, in Libya, in Vietnam, in Korea, the list goes on and on, prove that what America is committed to is maintaining its utter global dominance, whatever the price. The fact that maybe 600,000 Yemenis have died is totally immaterial to America.
In a way, that's what Mrs. May said, isn't it? That a ceasefire without dealing with the political issues won't solve anything. In other words, just stopping fighting now or within 30 days isn't really going to solve this issue, because the underlying political tensions and disagreements are still there.
Well, let's live in the world of realpolitik. If Mrs. May and indeed if Mr. Mattis are sincere in wanting to bring the war to a halt, then they will stop immediately all arms exports to Saudi Arabia. That would be a very powerful message to Riyadh that their main backers in the world, Washington and London, have now turned against them because of the civilian death toll in Yemen. However, until that day comes, then I am not going to be convinced that the Americans, Mr. Mattis, and the British, Mrs. May, are genuine when they say they are concerned about the war in Yemen. They haven't been concerned for the last 4 years. Why are they concerned now? I'll tell you why they're concerned now. Because the appalling murder of Jamal Khashoggi has put Saudi Arabia under a spotlight, and they need to manage this. And let's give credit where credit is due. They are handling it.
You were sceptical, and so far you may very well be right. You were sceptical that this murder would mean anything really, any difference in the world's attitude in real terms to Saudi Arabia as opposed to rhetoric. But the king's brother, younger brother, one of the sons of Abdulaziz, who's presumably untouchable, has flown back from self-imposed exile in London to Riyadh. Do you think that is a straw in the wind? Do you think some change might occur within the secretive circle of the Saudi royal family, the court?
Well, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on politics in Saudi Arabia, because I'm simply not. Maybe there will be consequences in regard to the movers and shakers within the Saudi government. However, if we're talking about the consequences of the Khashoggi merger in the context of the West's relationship with Saudi Arabia, then there is going to be no impact. I said that from day one when the news broke of this appalling murder, and I say that today. Why? Because Saudi Arabia, along with Israel, is absolutely crucial for the Americans and the British in terms of them maintaining their dominance of the Middle East. By them taking severe action against the Saudis, they're only going to be weakening their hold of the Middle East. Why would they do that? Well, they've never done that before, and they're not going to do it.
Now, this crime took place in Turkey. Turkish government are quite, how shall I put it, they have a high sense of amor propria. They hold themselves as something important in the world. The President Erdogan has pretensions to be the leader of the Muslim world. How do you think they're playing the aftermath of the slaying of Khashoggi?
Well, what I'm about to say is a view that I formed a few weeks ago, but also through speaking to diplomats, it's confirmed my suspicion or theory that the Turks are potentially benefiting from this, because the Turks are going along with this act at the moment. It has been orchestrated. There's a very serious issue at play because of the murder. There's a lot of damage, PR damage being done at the moment because of America and Britain's relationship with Saudi Arabia. So it needs to be dealt with, and it is being orchestrated. And Erdogan is playing a very important role because, as you said, George, the murder occurred on Turkish soil. However, for Erdogan to remain part of this act or this play, he is demanding concessions. And some of the concessions I've been told about are that he's demanding that the sanctions that were placed on Turkish officials as a result of the American Christian pastor who's been held are lifted. And secondly, concessions regarding the YPG in Syria.
That's so the
Kurdish armed forces. So certainly Turkey is positioning itself in a very, very powerful way, and they are, from what I'm being told, receiving concessions, because otherwise Erdogan could simply go public and say what really happened on that day, because he knows. He knows the Turkish intelligence services are some of the most powerful in the region, some of the most powerful in the world. They know exactly what happened, but he's going along with the script, a script that has been put together in Washington and London, and Turkey's benefiting from what I've been told.
Well, it is a bit of a dance of the seven veils. We're told about audio recordings, even video recordings, but we never quite see them. We're told that some people have been shown them who later deny that they have. That I'll grant you. But President Erdogan has to have a wider pan-Islamic agenda than that. He is, after all, the leading figure in that trend, that current in the world. What about if he makes a deal to end the Saudi siege of Qatar, for example? That would stand him in good stead with Qatar and show that he was a real player in the leadership of the Muslim world.
You see, I don't believe that's going to happen. Maybe Erdogan wants that to happen, but at the end of the day, Erdogan, like any Turkish leader, receives their orders from Washington. And Erdogan knows that without that blank check of support that Turkey has historically received since the end of the Second World War, or more specifically the beginning of the Cold War, Turkey has been able to act in the region and act barbarically, breaking international law on so many occasions because it is immune from prosecution, because it is backed by America. Erdogan knows that Turkey is in Cyprus because of the blank check it receives from America. They're in northern Syria because of the support it receives from America. They're in northern Iraq because of the support it receives from America. So yes, maybe Erdogan is looking to Qatar to try strike some sort of deal. But if that conflicts with American interests, then American policymakers will tell him privately, in no uncertain terms, that that is not what you should do. And if you do that, well, then we might just have to reconsider the military aid we give you, the strategic support we give you, the economic support we give you. They could turn around and say to him, right, in regard to Syria, you're on your own. In regard to Cyprus, we no longer support your illegal occupying army there.
Dr. Marcus, thanks for joining us on the Sputnik. And now it's your turn to tell us what you think through the portals of social media. What's rattling, Gayatri?
So we asked our audience whether the Khashoggi murder was the tipping point of the West's relations with Saudi Arabia, and it turns out they are as skeptical as Dr. Papadopoulos. RNB44 says, tipping point, the oil price decides what the tipping point is, and always will. And Bournemouth Brexit Battalion says, there's no tipping point with Saudi, George. There never was and there never will be. Saudi is a creation of the West, after all.
Well, it's a creation of Britain, actually. We were the father of modern Saudi Arabia, if modern is the right word.
Yeah.
The Americans
family
are...
Al-Saud, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's give this family a country.
Yeah, it's the only country in the world called after the ruling family. We are the father. The Americans are in loco parentis. I suppose I overestimated the power of the media and the liberal chattering class. I thought they might be able to force the governments into some change. Evidently not.
And that's all the time we've got for the tweets today.
Which, alas, means that's the end of the show.
But you can stay in touch with us on our social media, on Twitter and Instagram, RT_Sputnik, or on Facebook, Sputnik on Russia Today. It's goodbye from me, Gayatri.
And from me, George Galloway. It's been marvellous.